You're listening to the For the Good of the Public podcast, brought to you by the Center for Christianity and Public Life. We're your hosts. I'm Michael Ware.
And I'm Phebe Meyer.
Phoebe, it's great to be with you for another episode of the pod. And we have a talk from Ndidi Nwuneli, who's an exceptional leader, CEO of the One Campaign. She's really one of the most compelling social entrepreneurs that I've come across in my life. And now, relatively recently, she stepped into this leadership of the One Campaign in a period which we already knew was going to be significant. And she talks in this episode about this vision she sees for the future of Africa as a continent, and this positive vision, which is still holds and is still developing. The One Campaign is also involved with, really, as the leading advocacy voice related to U.S. foreign aid and international development, and as pressing and urgent as those issues were when she took the role, and even at the time of our summit, the nature of her job has just changed significantly over the last year. And so this is an interesting episode in which you'll get to learn more about American development efforts, about the One Campaign, and be able to take that information and apply it to what's really in many ways, a fundamentally changed environment in the U.S. But then you'll also hear Ndidi's vision for Africa's future, an Africa that is strong and revitalized and economically contributive. And that vision, persists to today.
Yeah, Ndidi also talks quite a bit about the role that faith has played, both in terms of the One Campaign's work and also her personal motivation for this work. And what many listeners might not know is that the One Campaign's origins are deeply tied to faith-based activism and started from a coalition that included many large Christian organizations. So much of the advocacy and the wins that the One Campaign has had over the last 2 decades of their work has been grounded in faith-based activism and has been the result of faith leaders, pastors, Christian artists coming together to advocate for the end of global poverty. I loved that Ndidi talked about the way that her Christian faith informs her approach to this work, and that grounding her work in humility, curiosity, and upholding the dignity of all people, ensuring that everyone has a seat at the table. These are the driving values of One Campaign. These are the driving values of Ndidi's own leadership.
And maybe Phoebe, before we introduce Ndidi, I'll just say, as a personal note, it was a real personal joy for me to have Ndidi at our summit, as she was a really key advisor for CCPL in our early days before we even publicly launched, and provided just critical advice that helped us get off the ground and help us get to the point where we could host a summit where she would deliver a keynote address. And so with that, I'm really excited for you to hear from Ndidi Nwuneli.
The talk you're about to hear is Africa's Bright Future. Ndidi Nwuneli is the president and CEO of the One Campaign. She has over 25 years of international development experience and has been deeply involved in fostering impactful solutions in the global social innovation landscape, with a focus on Africa. This talk was originally recorded at the 2024 For the Good of the Public Summit in Washington, D.C. A video recording of the talk and all resources, including ways to follow the speaker in today's episode, will be found in the show notes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and brothers and sisters. That was such a lovely introduction, and I really am honored to be here. I have been watching Michael from the day he first thought of this idea. Through Praxis, I got to meet him, and I'm so proud of this center and Michael Ware and the team behind this. Please give them another round of applause. It takes courage and tenacity and a can-do attitude. So well done, Michael. So I am, as I've been introduced, the president and the CEO of the One Campaign. And when I was invited to speak today, I was really excited because One's history was rooted in faith. Some of you might not know that, but when One was actually founded, it was initially called DATA, Debt, Aid, and Trade for Africa. And one of the first things we pushed early in our history was debt forgiveness. And we partnered with the Catholic Church on the Drop the Debt campaign. And it was a Jubilee year, and we were able to get about $100 billion worth of debt forgiven. Many of these debts taken when African countries did not deserve to take them, did not know what they were taking, and some had a colonial legacy. And we have built on that history. It's been truly impressive because it's such a fundamental part of what we believe. The mindset of the One Campaign is that we fight for justice and equity. And so in that same vein, the next big battle we took on was HIV/AIDS. And under a Republican administration, when Bush was president, we actually helped launch PEPFAR. And PEPFAR is one of the most successful programs the U.S. has launched, saving 25 million lives over the last 20 plus years. And when we think about the impact, it took Republicans and Democrats working together on a very important issue. But what connected them? Seeing humans as one and really looking into the eyes of individuals and saying, why should we let others suffer when we have opportunity to work alongside them to ensure healing, restoration, and life? So on this legacy, 20 years later, I got a phone call when I was sitting at my desk in Lagos, Nigeria, to consider the position. And at first, as many of you would imagine, I said, I'm not an advocacy person. I'm a social entrepreneur. And I knew we have many social entrepreneurs in the room. And I thought and prayed. And when Bono got on the phone, he actually convinced me. And he quoted a TED talk I had given on the power of faith-based organizations. And I was really impressed that he listened, obviously. And he said, Ndidi, you said God is not a micromanager. He's placed us here as light of the world, salt of the earth. And we're failing. And that was a line from my TED talk that he reminded me. And that's one of my messages to you today. And you've heard from so many speakers, and I know there are many, many more to come. This was back in 2017. I gave this talk because a child had asked me a question about why God loved people differently and why more children from one region or the next could die and others couldn't. And I realized then and there that we were called to be light of the world and salt of the earth, and that God was not going to come here to solve our problems. We had to solve them ourselves. And so I've taken this mantle on, building on the 20-year legacy of the founders of the One Campaign and the terrific staff that work across the world fighting for justice, fighting for equity. And under my leadership as the first African and first Black woman, my conviction is threefold. Number one, that we have to change narratives about Africa. We have to change the face of Africa from a hungry child to a successful female entrepreneur. Many people are stuck in the narrative of this late 60s, early 70s, when we definitely created a lot of buzz from my region of the world with the Biafran War, where hunger was used as a weapon of starvation. But Africa today is the youngest continent. 70% of our population is under 35. We have actually the greatest number of entrepreneurs on the continent in the world, meaning African entrepreneurs produce, innovate faster than many, many other world regions. We also have technology that's leapfrogging in agriculture, in many, many range of services, including AI. And in terms of our creative industries, our advancement around Nollywood, our music industry, our fashion industry is booming. But we have so much to teach the world because we actually understand the complexity of living together in diversity. And many people don't realize how diverse the African continent is. 54 countries, extremely blessed by God for natural excellence in many, many sectors. But that diversity in many, many parts of our world and many parts of Africa have been a big challenge. Nigeria, my country, currently has about 200 million people. We're projected to be 500 million by 2050 and 1.4 by the turn of the century. Think about it. My city, Lagos, currently has 20 million people and is going to have 50 million by 2050. Now, when you think about that population growth, it is enormous, but it means that the future of the workforce of the world is coming from Africa, right? And that it is not a nice to have, but a must have that our regions partner. And that's one of the benefits of being at the One campaign. Number one is changing narratives. Number two is really leveraging faith communities to drive impact. Faith is critical to our work at One. I've mentioned PEPFAR, I've mentioned Drop the Dead in partnership with the Catholic Church, but we actually have an active faith program right here in the United States. Under the leadership of one of my amazing colleagues, Cogans, who was a former pastor and still pastors from time to time. He is working with faith communities across the U.S. and he's mapped where all our senators are and where their faith leaders are. And we have a very successful and high-impact faith program where we bring them to Washington for fly-ins. And the other day, I had dinner with a group from New Hampshire. Many of the elderly, many people who want to serve, many people who believe in humanity. And we're building out on the success of our U.S. program, a faith council around the world. Because we believe faith connects people in ways that many other things don't. Oftentimes, we talk about faith dividing. I actually believe faith connects. Now, faith connects when we actually really are people of faith. And I mentioned Nigeria being diverse. It's 50% Muslim, 50% Christian. You know that every public meeting starts with a prayer, a Christian prayer and a Muslim prayer in every public meeting. And when my staff at Ace Foods, one of the food companies we've built, fast, the Muslims fast, the Christians fast alongside them. When they're breaking their fast, the Christians and Muslims pray together. And I always laugh that the interesting thing was that in our Christmas parties, we have more Muslim staff trying to join to sing along Christmas carols. And I'm like, wow, that's really amazing. So it's about seeing people first as humans and building out our faith network. What we want to do under my leadership is really invite people who are sitting across the aisle to connect in a deeply human level, a level where we see each other, where we trust each other, but where we also believe we're here on assignment and where we are here because we have a legacy that's bigger and deeper than our own. And that's what One's faith program is built on and hinged on, that humanity. And the third thing that I really would like to say under my leadership is that we help and partner with more countries to graduate from debt. Because it's one thing for us to help during times of crisis, and faith communities do that very well. But it's another thing to say we're going to support and stand with each other as we're graduating from debt, as we're growing our economies. We're going to fight for the investments and resources required to ensure economic growth across the world. And Africa is critical to that. My vision as this new CEO is that Africa is an equal player and that we as the many, many parts of the world recognize its value and partner alongside it to transform the future of our world. I'll end with 2 points that I would like to encourage you to think about in your role for this fight for humanity and to see each other. And the first one is a quote that I first heard from a young African speaking to a president. And he said, I'm no longer going to ask God to grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Do you guys remember that prayer? Many Christians always say it. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. He said, no, I'm no longer saying that prayer. I'm going to ask the Almighty for the courage and wisdom to change the things I cannot accept. I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to ask God for the courage and wisdom to change the things I cannot accept. And I cannot accept that as humans, we prefer to dwell on our differences instead of our commonalities. I cannot accept that we put one life over the other or one race over the other. I can't accept that. I have happened to be biracial. My mother's white American Jewish. My father's Nigerian Episcopalian. So you can imagine why equity is part of my identity. I was raised to believe that no race was higher than another. And I saw love in my home. And I think we as people of faith can demonstrate that. and can live that. The second quote that inspires me is an Igbo proverb. That's my language. And it's actually the word for love in Igbo. And the word for love is ihunanya, which means to see you in your eye, to see you. It literally means I see you all the time. And as I've reflected on that in this new role, I'm living in Washington for the last 6 months. I've realized the complexities of seeing people for who they are as humans, of removing the veils, removing the scales, removing the labels, and removing the identities. It's tough in this town. This is a tough town. And to see somebody in their eye, to see them as equals, to see them for their potential, to see them with respect, to see them because you assume they deserve to be here. They deserve a seat at the table. They deserve to be heard. Is a challenge for all of us. And I challenge you to see people for who they are and to show them that love, that regardless of what your preconceived notion is, when you get to the core of it, they're just human and they deserve a seat at the table. We believe at One that no one is equal until all of us are equal. And we believe at One that where you're born should not determine whether you live. And I believe in my lifetime, working across the aisle, working with people of faith, standing on the values that we're created to believe in, standing in the values of humanity, dignity, and respect, that we can fight for a more just world. And I look forward to partnering with many of you to fight for the investments and resources required to ensure healthy lives and economic growth in Africa. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, the Bonos, the Jamie Drummonds, the Bobby Shrivers, but working with the next generation of One leaders, I believe will create even more impact in our world. God bless you all.
You've been listening to the For the Good of the Public podcast, an initiative of the Center for Christianity and Public Life. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast so you don't miss an episode. CCPL is a donor-supported nonprofit. Visit our website at ccpubliclife.org to learn how you can partner with us and connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Our hosts for today's episode are CCPL founder and CEO Michael Ware and myself, Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor Phoebe Meyer. Our podcast is produced by Glowfire Creative and Liminal Podcasts. Our in-studio recording engineer is Conrad Ossie Poets. Our podcast editor is Seth Creekmore, and our theme music is Lamb's Farm by Sam Barsh.